Everyone, welcome to Foresight's Biotech and Health Extension Group. And we're delighted today to have Jamie Justice with us. I think, Jamie, you presented maybe 2 years ago or something last time in our group, and it was a really well-regarded seminar that still often gets flagged. But today you're here to talk about something entirely different, or not quite different, but about a new, really exciting effort that some of you probably have already heard because it really made quite the rounds in the media. It is really one of its kind, and it's a new effort from XPRIZE focused on Healthspan. And we're really happy to have you here. I'm going to share a lot more info about you and your role with XPRIZE here in the chat. But for now, why don't you just take it away? I'm sure we have a ton of questions, so we can get to them as soon as possible.
That sounds great. I hope you all can hear me. I apologize in advance. I'm going to try to project my voice as much as possible, but I ended up getting very sick. So this is about all the voice I have. So it's not your audio, it's me. Just make sure and turn up the volume if you can. I'm glad to see a few friends and familiar faces on here. Some of you I know quite well. Tina and Jesse, it's good to at least see your shining pictures on here, and a few other friends and names that I know. And also for Allison, thank you so much for the invitation to come and present. I'm really excited to share with this group. As mentioned, I have been a member of Foresight, which, Allison, thank you for that, the last couple of years, and have presented previously as an academic on clinical trials in geroscience, particular biomarker plans and biospecimen collection plans for clinical trials in geroscience, based on my work in the TAME trial targeting aging with metformin, and also early stage proof of concept trials with things like senolytics and other dietary and lifestyle interventions. So now I'm sharing with you in a really different role. As most here know, within the last year, I transitioned. I still do have an academic appointment at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. My lab is still there, but I tell you, right now, it's mainly token appearances as I've transitioned to XPRIZE Foundation, which is a nonprofit foundation that runs incentivized competitions in all areas of science and technology. And we have just opened a large-scale prize for Healthspan, so really focused on aging research, and in particular incentivizing early stage trials and early development. So again, it really is my pleasure to be here to speak with you, or at least whisper to you for the next, and we'll try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. So I will go through some of the information quickly, but if there is a clarification question, do let me know. But I will leave time at the end for discussion. So again, all of my work, both as an academic and my role in XPRIZE, as Allison said, my role has transitioned, but my research and my scientific drive has not changed. Most of my work, whether it's been from doing work in animal models from mice, non-human primates, and even the human primate, has been, if an intervention could delay aging, how do we know? And so I've been more interested in establishing the frameworks by which we test the geroscience hypothesis, which is essentially that there is an aging biology and that this biology can be targeted therapeutically to affect not just one disease, but multiple, and with the goal of extending health and life. All right, so that's my general background. And so my work leading up to XPRIZE was at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and then still at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, where I've worked translationally through the Translational Geroscience Network, both small and large-scale translational and clinical trials work, and also previously had managed and do a lot of biomarker work for trials. Again, a little bit of my history and background. Now I'm using that exact same history and background and working not just on my own projects, but again, building frameworks that the field can use to try to incentivize and accelerate breakthroughs. All right. Again, yep, I'll note XPRIZE. So first, a little bit about what is XPRIZE, because this may be a new area for many of us. I know it certainly was to me. It's not that I went out looking for this. They actually headhunted me out of the lab. And so I had to do a little background work to figure out exactly what this group was and what they were doing. It's a very different model. It's not providing upfront funding for research or science or seed money for companies. They're incentivized competitions. And they've actually been in operation since the mid-90s. The first XPRIZE came out, was first announced in the mid-1990s and was finally awarded in 2004. It was a $10 million incentivized competition to have, 2 manned space flights, so of 100 kilometers, and they had to go and come back down and go again within 2 weeks. So again, the object being to incentivize commercial space travel. But they did this not by going to the moon, but by setting really objective, clear, and measurable targets that would incentivize the space. And in this case, the first prize was around $10 million, but teams and industry ended up actually, it took at least 10 times that amount to come up with those solutions that ultimately won. And so that's the goal of the prize, is that by putting some goal or target out there, is that we can actually incentivize funding and investment within particular areas that are in need for a breakthrough. And for those that wonder if I just have $101 million to hand out right now, no, it is at the end of the prize. And that this is why the prizes are they actually do have a proven track record. So far at XPRIZE, they have now, with this prize, we have now active or handed out $411 million in total prize purse across different areas in science and tech. They have at least 400 different semifinalist teams that are part of a really broad and rich alumni network, have actually launched more than 1,000 scientific publications from teams that are actively pursuing various prizes, also resulted in many patents. And again, the biggest case here is large-scale investment, not just by the competing teams, but in people interested in funding those teams. So new funding areas opened up and different trademark filings. And so this is why prize is that they actually do work and that they work to create change. And now this, why an XPRIZE in aging? I know this is probably a topic I don't need to share too deeply on with this group. I think we're all of a mind here. Aging is the most important area of research, period. We know that our global population is aging, and I'm certainly not of the gloom and doom set. This is a cause for celebration. This is a wonderful human achievement. But if we don't have some innovative solutions to address the age-related health declines, then we will be in serious trouble. The current state of affairs is that in the last 100 years, we have increased life expectancy by upwards of 30 years in most modern countries. I believe the 30-year number is in the U.S. In the U.S., there's currently a gap between the life expectancy. These are numbers by the WHO from 2019. There currently is a gap from human life expectancy to the health-adjusted life expectancy, such that we're living longer, but not necessarily in a state of better health for the extra years given. And this has resulted in a major increase in disability and age-related disability. And that's really where this prize is set to target. That's where a lot of our endpoints and measures are around this area of how do we keep people functional, engaged, and independent for longer to really make up that gap. And will there be, I've often been asked this, will there be some effect on lifespan? Possibly, but we just don't have the time span to measure that in these trials. Again, we're really focused on health and things that we can do to make up this gap. And again, not necessary for this group. You guys have all seen this figure, I'm sure. But age is the strongest risk factor for most chronic conditions, even those that share very few clinical risk factors among one another. And that's shown in this figure here from the Milbank. And that unless we begin to target the root cause that cuts across these different chronic diseases, biologic aging, we're really unlikely to have a measurable impact at the population level because one disease will simply be replaced by another. And that's what current medical practice has gotten us. And again, I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm going to move quickly through this. We do know that aging has a distinct biology. There has been increasingly better evidence around this and potential targets for therapeutics. And that certainly in animal models, these have been shown to extend lifespan, but also extend health span, such that we're not just less dead, but actually improving health for the life that's given in animals. And those are, again, across models from Drosophila to mice to now there's increasing evidence even in dogs, non-human primates. And we're at the edge of how do we test this in humans? And that has been one of the biggest gaps. The gap going from animal and preclinical R&D into clinical trials is not just a gap, but the Grand Canyon for most therapeutic and drug development areas. This is widely known. But when we're talking about aging, where we don't actually have a very clear regulatory or even field agreed upon consensus about how we should measure and what to test, either at the early stage proof of concept trials or at these larger scale regulatory facing trials. These go from, again, a gap to a barrier that almost becomes impossible to pass through on its own without a major initiative to drive development. And so that's really where XPRIZE and this prize is poised, is to try to overcome that. And so the mission of Healthspan XPRIZE, or excuse me, that's actually reversed to be XPRIZE Healthspan. You can see I didn't do my own copy editing. I should have given this to smarter people than me to give it a look before putting it up. But again, I'll send all of these out. You'll have access to the slides. But these are the goals. Is first, we want to provide important evidence that biologic aging can and should be a target for development of therapeutics of multiple kinds. So not just drugs, but drugs, biologics, devices, combination. And so we really need to have proof of concept that the public will understand and that can lead to a path for regulatory change. We hope to stimulate a global research network. Foresight has been a great partner for us because Foresight's actually been trying to do this and trying to build a network of people and gain consensus and education. And we'll use this as a platform that we can actually try to accelerate and expand that network. We hope that this, again, using this as a prize model, is that we're hoping to lead to even greater investments in longevity, biology of aging, and biotech in this area, as that is the drive. That we provide funding later on, but we start a global conversation and a push now to drive investment for teams and in this area. We also need to develop methodologies for measuring health span, specifically those for early stage trials. So this is everything from biomarker development to functional assessments and how we can actually employ those and make them very practical for trialists. And then again, as mentioned, biomarkers are incredibly important and are near and dear to my heart. And of course, within this proof of concept is engaging a public discourse. This is meant to be very open, very transparent. This is science for everybody. And I think that we need to have this as an open platform so that we can democratize aging science and aging research and drive regulatory reform. And we also do have a bonus prize on a rare genetic disease called FSHD. And one of our early benefactors provided money up front to see that those who are aging with FSHD have either an accelerated or accentuated muscular, and again, it looks like either accelerated or accentuated aging of muscle. And so they're hoping that some of these same solutions might be really applicable for FS. So that's a lot to get done. And so how do we do it? I'll give you a quick overview. As said, I've already mentioned this. So we have two prize purses. We call it the $101 million XPRIZE Healthspan, and that is the prize for that arm. There is a bonus prize of $10 million for persons who are testing their therapeutic in patients with genetically identified FSHD. The barrier, of course, as this group well knows, is that current medical practice really focuses on treating symptoms of illness, injury, and disease once at a time and after they develop. And that this has not been a really great solution for human aging, which doesn't look anything like that. And that we need real breakthroughs and a proactive system in order to address this. I introduce the team. I know at least one or two of my people are on the call today. I'm the executive director, Jamie Justice. I'm also accompanied by, excuse me just 1 second. I'm trying to keep my voice for you guys and dry. Accompanied by my medical deputy. She's my second brain. This Dr. Laura Getz. She's actually in practice in Santa Monica, and she's actually a surgeon, an Army surgeon, and an oncologist who saw the light and transitioned over to prevention and preventive care many years ago. And she has a really great specialization in alternative trial designs and N-of-1 trials. So she is just a really fantastic resource for those who are interested in that as well. And she's providing a lot of the safety and regulatory guidance on these. Dr. Lauren Pierpoint, I believe, is on today's call. I think I saw her join. If you haven't met Lauren, you should. She's really outstanding. She's a epidemiologist and a biostatistician, and she's providing a lot of our analytics support and guidance. And Delali is our prize manager. If we get anything done, it's because Delali really holds the torch to our feet. Again, this is our team. You're welcome to reach out to any one of us to learn more about the prize. Over the last few months, actually, this prize has been incubating for a long time. But over the last couple of months, we've had a really engaged endpoints committee. This is after I joined, is I brought these 4 people on, and they really helped drive the metrics of the prize as we know it now. And this is Dr. Patrick Maxwell, who's head of clinical medicine at University of Cambridge. He's our outsider. He's not a geriatrician, and he's not in geroscience. Is that we wanted to make sure that we weren't designing this in an echo chamber. Resident biologist Steve Ostad, absolute superhero Tom Rando at UCLA, the Broad, and of course Luigi Ferrucci at the NIA. So they have been my right hand, and I couldn't ask for a better team to work with. And so together with us and all of the development before going into this, we have what we call our winning team will statement. So it's the burden of proof that's needed. The winning team must demonstrate that their therapeutic restores muscle, cognitive, and immune function in persons aged 65 to 80. The therapeutic treatment must take 1 year or less. And we're awarding the funds based on the magnitude of the effect that's shown. So these are going to be indexed to expected age-related declines that would be seen over 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years in a referent population. So again, we're looking for the change in 1 year, and we're indexing that against the change from a referent population. And so I'll go into more specifics of what that means, but you can see the total award amount there only goes up to 81. And that's because we have a couple of milestone awards. 20 million of that will be given out at 2 stages in advance. First is for qualifying submission, and I'll give you all the timeline for these in a moment, but that qualifying submission will be due by the end of this year. And that's to award rigorous research and development on the therapeutic or the screening method of choice. $10 million will be awarded to 40 teams in the Healthspan Award. Not reflected here, another $10 million will also go to 8 teams in the FSHD Award, $2 million. So every team gets roughly $250,000, which of course is not necessarily enough that would be needed in order to run an early stage proof of concept trial. But it is a token of award and something that we can help teams use to get their own investment and additional funding. Next, that rolls into a semifinal stage, was our proof of concept clinical trials of roughly 30 to 60 days. This is an opportunity for teams to show us that they can get their regulatory paperwork in order, they can recruit subjects, they can get in the field. We'll be looking at short-term turnaround, short-term changes in biomarkers, and just that some of our metrics for success in the finals trials, the teams are able to do that. So it's almost like a run-in for the competition itself, but it actually can provide really critical information back to the teams regarding safety, potential effects, and if teams are working on combinations, can help them figure out some of the dosing strategies and some of their safety metrics. So again, that's really the purpose there. At the end of those semifinals, 10 of those teams will be selected as finalists. Each team will receive $1 million to advance on to the finals. We're not saying that teams, if they don't meet those qualifiers, they can continue on, but they just don't get some of the distinction and some of the added benefits with it. Our finals, again, this is if you want to win the big bucks, you make it through those 10 teams that make it. They have to show that there's an improvement in muscle, cognitive, and immune functions in 1 year. And alternatively, for those in the FSHD, they're running trials really looking at change in muscle in 1 year in persons with confirmed FSH. And once again, the awarding is indexed relative to the magnitude that would be expected, the magnitude of the effect indexed against expected declines. And we'll have additional testing considerations. Of course, safety is really important in dealing with human subjects. So is tolerability. So those are more like patient-reported outcomes about how they feel when they're taking the drug. Accessibility is really important. This can include anything from cost to administer or other barriers. As again, it would be great if we would like to actually make sure that this is a scalable solution that can be given to the most people. We'll also be using these trials as an opportunity to collect biomarkers, and we'll be looking for both clinical risk factors and to ensure that some of the effects are reflected in the biology. And of course, legal and ethical compliance. Our teams are required to get their own regulatory approval. Timelines for this, we're right now in an open public comment period. Unlike a regular trial, I actually want your feedback. If you hate it, tell me. If you have ideas for how this gets improved, tell us. Our board meets regularly. We just met this week. We're going to be meeting again. We have crucial decisions to make. Our guidelines can change, and we expect them to based on the feedback from this group. So again, if you have thoughts or ideas, it's a time to tell them. And so that's for the first 6 months. Beginning in July, we will finalize those guidelines and we'll have our qualifying submissions call. That's our primary registration period. That primary registration will run through the end of this year into those, or be due in December. Those qualifying submissions will be judged in the first quarter of 2025, and our first milestone awards will go out at that point. Our semifinals will then be judged about a year and a half after that. People will have just about a year, those semifinalists, to run those early stage proof of concept trials, 30, 60 days, maybe 10 people, however many you need. You have to bring us the evidence for that. And then we will award those who can start into the finals. That buffer period allows people to go out and get investments, get funding, and hopefully also secure regulatory paperwork. So again, those timelines are also open. Please do tell us if we think we need more or less time to advance. What's not negotiable are the finals. We want this prize to be won by 2030. Okay, so how to win? I'm going to go through and really focus on just the grand finals because we do have a limited time frame. And so I'm going to focus only on what you need to get to that 81 million maximum amount after we've given away the 2 earlier milestone awards. And I'm framing this, and for anyone who's familiar with trials, we typically arrange these in what we call PICO, right? Your population, intervention, control, outcomes timeline. Our population, as mentioned, these are intended to be in older adults. We're not necessarily saying healthy, we're saying generalizable. But the people, they do need to be free of life-threatening or major disease or disability. We have had public comment and many comments coming back about the age range and would we consider opening it. That's definitely certainly open for discussion and debate. We do estimate, at least for budgeting purposes and practical reasons, people will have to come to us with their own sample size estimates, but these are not large-scale phase 3 regulatory-facing trials. These are smaller fleet trials that would be awarded, that would be the next stage on to de-risk a trial of that size. And so we're expecting most of these trials should be run in roughly 40 to 200 participants, because that's really what's reasonable to recruit in the time window given. And I also have to set some parameters for budgeting. All right, the intervention, of course, that's completely up to the team's discretion. We're not telling you what to test. We're not telling you what to develop. We're just saying that safety is, of course, a priority. These can be drugs, they can be biologics, they can be devices, they can be combinations, they could be in combination with the lifestyle. We're not saying what, we're saying make it work. All right, our controls, yes, required, but the specifics of what that looks like really depends on the intervention and some of the trial design specifics. And so we'll be working with teams a little bit one-on-one back and forth about what those constraints may be. Outcomes, of course, muscle, cognitive, and immune. The and is bold. So remember, it is not one of 3 or 2 of 3, it's all 3. And we're looking at 1 year. Again, when we're talking about these all 3, what do these measurements look like? We do have specific work groups in our advisory board that we're informing exactly what those measures are, and we do want feedback from our competing teams on what's feasible to measure. So we're not meaning to be cagey at this stage, but we're actively looking for feedback. But each of these areas, we do expect there to be a functional measure and supported by some biomarker measure. Those functional measures, right, that's usually we're stressing the system and we're measuring output. And so if we're thinking about muscle's not just muscle's actually really systemic. This is really motor function, physical function, performance. And muscle's just a handy word that our marketing group really, so we had to go with it. But really, when we're thinking about it, when I'm thinking about it as a scientist and what some of the measures are going to be, these are really complex measurements. Things like endurance that could be captured by cardiopulmonary exercise testing or 6-minute walk. These could be things like mobility and stair climbing measures. We're really actively would love to have something in lower body strength and power if we can see what devices or what kind of equipment testing sites might have access to. We do also expect to have muscle mass measured as deuterated creatine that can be done in urine and really well standardized, and looking for opportunities if anyone has other interest or ideas for biofluid-based biomarkers. Cognition about the same. We're going to have a neuropsych testing battery, likely computerized and also pen and paper for different subdomains of cognition. We'd also like to include some measures of sensory perception. And back and forth again, if our sites have access to imaging as needed, but at the bare minimum, we will also have biofluid-based biomarkers to support cognition. Immune function is a little bit trickier. We're getting a lot of advice from our advisors on this. I would love to have some antibody response to a challenge like a vaccine. Whether we can do that globally or not is the big question. And so we're actively looking for referent data and ideas right now about that, or if we can do some other kind of in vitro immune cell challenge function. And there will also, of course, be biomarker panels that will support that. So those are some of our thoughts. If you have ideas or recommendations for specific measures, this is not a one-way conversation. Bring them to me. All right. And now how to win. So where do we go from here? So we have these 3 areas. People have to show on the first step, they have to show an improvement in all 3. And that improvement is relative to control. I'm showing this in a framework that's like a clinical trial, like a standard randomized double-blind placebo control. The trials that go to finals may look like this and they may not. Again, we have a lot of feedback, but this is the standard example, is that we'll be looking at, for each of those functional domains, that you have to show that your therapeutic shows not just an attenuation of decline, but an actual improvement in 1 year. And again, I'm showing these right now separated by male and female, just as an example to show how it works. And if you can show that you show improvement in the measures that we set out for those, muscle, cognitive, immune, for each of those 3 domains, show improvement, then you're eligible for awarding. And the awarding is indexed to declines that are expected at a referent population. So these are, again, we have a referent population. The example data shown here is from the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, BLSA, that's conducted by the NIH. And these show the annualized change in function per year. These are based on muscle strength, I believe, and so they are sex stratified. And so we would take simply that same therapeutic change, that magnitude of change that we saw in those relative measures in the previous slide. We look at that magnitude of change relative to the expected change, and the awarding is just based on the thresholding therein. So again, need to show that there is some statistical power in the first one. This one, we're just looking at those means and saying whether or not they achieve a threshold or not. And so that's our current framework. Again, we're open to feedback. We're not saying this is the answer. We're saying this is our first best guess. And right now it works fairly well because it's simple. Definitely a public comment period. FSHD bonus prize, again, there is a focus on $10 million for muscle. And these have to be in persons who are genetically confirmed diagnosis of FSHD, and they have to demonstrate an improvement in muscle. And so what this looks like, a lot of similar measures to what we're proposing to do for the main trial, with an addition of muscle fat fraction by MRI. And they have clinically meaningful parameters for that disease that are really well laid out. And so their metrics for success are slightly different and more focused. And so these are not really going to change. Teams to win that $10 million bonus have to show a 20% reduction in muscle fat fraction relative to control and a 25% improvement in functional measures, right? So again, those are the 2 arms. Additional considerations, of course, safety, tolerability, scalability. I already mentioned this earlier. These are, of course, really important to us. We're not setting criteria threshold for those. They're considerations as people advance through the phases, both milestones and final awarding. We will be collecting biospecimens and we'll be looking at biologic measures as well as clinical risk factors. What's really important is that I have an interest in a partnership in working with our biomarkers consortium, as well as Methuselah Foundation, is that something that we know is that biomarkerly important as surrogate endpoints, but biomarkers require for surrogate endpoint validation clinical trials that are run. This is an opportunity to run at least 10 different clinical trials with different therapeutics, collecting biospecimens before and after. It gives us a chance to validate biomarkers at the same time that we're testing those therapeutics. And so this is, I think, a really great opportunity. So maybe even if you're on the call and you don't know that you're really that interested in maybe competing with a therapeutic, but you do have ideas for biomarkers, we still want you to be part of this. This for me is another, again, a really major driving factor. The 2 really belong together and need to be developed at the same time. All right, so that's my pitch there. But again, we have certainly a partnership with the Biomarkers Consortium with technical advisors. We will be hosting biomarker summits and team summits during the prize in particular years 1 through 3 for biomarker development that will inform the biomarkers that go into these trials. And also a nice partnership. I think I saw Dane hop on with Methuselah Foundation, who they're running a biomarker prize, and that the winners of those prizes could have their biomarker tested in our trials. So again, it's a really nice opportunity for the field, both for therapeutics and biomarkers development. And if you want to register, registration's open. We're having an intent to compete phase right now. It's pretty cheap for those who want to register. It's $500. It's not meant to be a barrier. It's just meant to help us keep from getting spammed with ideas. If the 500 is a barrier you cannot cross, please do let us know. But that is the threshold right now. Once we go into a primary registration phase starting in July, when our competition guidelines are out and our guidelines are set, that does bump up to $1,000. You don't have to pay more at that stage. If you paid the $500, you're good for the rest of the time. Teams who want to come in late can, but they have to pay to play at that point because we have to re-impanel judges and we have to evaluate and we have to do trainings and get teams up to speed on our protocols. So that's really what those cost to compete. That's why they go up so much as the stages go on. Okay, so that's active right now. What does it look like right now? We've been active for almost 2 months. Lauren, who's on, has been gathering data on all of our teams. And we currently have 183 teams pre-registered. This is as of last week. This is where they're coming from. So we want this to be a global competition, and damn it, we got it. This is great. We have teams from 36 countries across 6 continents. We currently don't have anyone from Antarctica competing. I don't expect them to, but if someone there, it would be a really big win for us. So let us know. So again, this is a snapshot of where all of our teams are. Their main clusters, as this group is probably not unexpected. I think close to 80 of those teams are all in the U.S. And these are teams that have pre-registered, at least put their name out there, but they may not have completed all of their documents yet. And that's fine. There's time to do. But again, this is a really nice snapshot, I think, for those of us interested in aging and who else is doing research in these areas. And it's really nice to see where we all are. Okay. And so what are people coming in with? Lauren, again, is on the call, I think, and she can give you a much better overview of exactly what our teams are doing. I'm just showing this as a highlight. Of those teams that have completed their registration application for this phase, the intent, so not all 183, but 30 some odd of these teams, we're really seeing solutions that cross all sectors. And so I think this is really interesting. Roughly 30% are bringing in applications proposing a new drug, some new device or biologic. Many are looking at lifestyle and behavioral interventions, either alone or coupled with some other intervention. Many are proposing supplements and nutraceuticals. Others are really looking at repurposed drugs. And of course, some, as we would expect, are looking at certain cell therapies, among many others. So we really are across the spectrum. And this is really great for us because it gives us better leverage to go and talk to the FDA, which is another really big mission for us, is that because we're crossing drugs, biologics, devices, this isn't going to hit one desk at the FDA, and it will require cross-department communication. And so that gives us a better opportunity to start those discussions and have a public meeting. So again, really happy to see this and just thought you all might be interested. And this is my final slide. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and conversation, but these are the people to talk to. I mentioned my immediate team, Delali, our prize manager, Laura, Dr. Laura Getz, Dr. Lauren Pierpoint. For those interested in either partnerships, sponsorships, or press, those are the folks on the right-hand side to reach out to. And so with that, I thank you very much. And Allison, again, huge hats off to you for really driving this foresight group and for the opportunity to speak. Or whisper.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a lot to digest. And it's really cool to see it's an amazing pipeline that you have and just a really great process in place. And it's so much more than just a prize. It's an entire ecosystem that you're creating. Really awesome to see. I'm sure we have a bunch of questions. I'll let you maybe just take a breather so you can maybe get a glass of water. And in the meantime, perhaps if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or to put your question here in the chat. Okay, we already have one question. So Anita, if you want to ask your question now, then we can get to it whenever Jamie's ready.
Yeah.
So sorry, I was going to ask, is there any chance that the committee might consider testing in a population that exhibits signs of premature and metabolic dysfunction as that you would see in aging, but in a younger population. I know that would make it hard to cross-reference against BLSA, but is it possible that they would entertain the idea in looking at a younger population that is showing immune dysfunction, metabolic dysfunction, and some of those other biomarkers that you are examining?
I personally am okay with it, but we have to make defining characteristics. And so where the age range came from is when we're looking at again, as you said, the referent population, that's really where it comes from, is that there's a period of age there where, if we're not looking cross-sectionally, but looking longitudinally, the annual rate of change becomes quasi-linear, which makes it much easier for us to draw a reference threshold against. So if we can have the evidence that we can make this both sex and age stratified, if that holds maybe down to 50 or 55, then we will consider extending the age range. But right now we're in a phase where we have to have the evidence to support that. But I think certainly we want to make sure that what we're looking at is aging and not specifically metabolic dysfunction. So I know that we've also been trying to be really careful about our endpoints are not necessarily disease-based, and we're trying to make sure that our entry criteria are not necessarily disease-based. We're sitting in a funny sort of gray space around function. But I think if we can bring them enough evidence that we show that there's dysfunction that's subclinical, that increases the risk of, and is still in an age range that would be relevant to aging, I think we might have an opportunity to maybe change that. If you wouldn't mind writing that down to us and send it as an inquiry, that gives me something that I can keep taking back to our board to try to get some of our initial guidelines changed.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Next one up, we have Jim and then Andy. Jim, do you want to unmute? Otherwise, I'm also happy to ask. Okay, you can't unmute, so I'm going to ask it instead. It sounds like you'll be helping the applicants navigate the FDA. Will you be helping the winner or all of the applicants?
Oh, the winner or all the applicants. Okay, so we are at least going to start public meetings that we hope to accelerate the process. What we can't do is help every individual team. What we will have is within our ecosystem, we do have regulatory consultants and partners. And so they'll be offering services. We're going to have team summits and others available, and we'll make sure to have those people on site. We can't, as an org, I can't particularly go out and individually help teams because we don't want to inadvertently show favoritism to one team or another. But we can make resources available that teams can engage. And I think that's probably more important for the ecosystem in general. So yes, we're engaging, we're looking for folks. And again, if you happen to be a regulatory consultant or know one that you think might be interested in this, have them contact us. We're really building the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so
much.
much.
And we're also happy to keep you in the loop if we do get a public meeting, which we're hoping for. Foresight will be on the email list for that.
Yeah, please do keep us posted. That would be major. Next one up, we have Andy.
Following on the FDA conversation, is the expectation that this will be like a phase 2 clinical trial with that kind of registration?
Exactly. I would say almost nailed it exactly. Those first stages, we're really setting it up so that we can hopefully build an infrastructure for early phase 0, phase 1s. And then these will roll into what we see as a phase 2. Ideally, at the same time as we're running this competition, large-scale clinical trials that are FDA-facing for those clinically adjudicated. I would love to see the TAME trial finally get in the field. Best trial that never was. I worked on it for 8 years. I would love to see it happen. But something like that would still be needed. So whoever gets this, depending on where the FDA falls out, whether this can go immediately for indication or would have to probably be tested again in some kind of large clinically adjudicated endpoint because that's what FDA likes.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And we're pursuing Parkinson's disease with mitophagy enhancers, which also have this broad application. So I could see likely this aging endpoint examination going in parallel or maybe as like secondary endpoints kind of thing.
And that's fine. So whether it's Parkinson's or something like that. So we've talked to other groups that are interested in testing if they're working on drugs in Alzheimer's prevention or something like that. And maybe they'll have a secondary arm or something that they'll add some of these measures to a trial. As long as we can work within those parameters, that's why we're trying to leave things as suggestions for our teams that allows enough wiggle room that certainly commercial players can still not go completely bankrupt trying to compete for a prize. and that will have the most application for those that are actually working in the space.
Excellent. One last point on the readouts. There's some high level things there. And I know for each of these areas, there aren't really broadly accepted measures of biological age drift. Do you expect by the end of the registration period that more concrete endpoint goals will be published?
Absolutely. So that's right now we're really actively working on getting the data together. Both folks on my team, Lauren, who's on, our epidemiologist, and others of trying to build out reference guidelines, and also working really closely with Luigi and others on actual data sets and building out thresholding. We don't want to be too prescriptive at this stage, is that one of the goals is to actually have people innovate on particular measures that would beat ours, because we understand that if we're using data that already exists, we're handicapped out of innovation for things that might be better than. So again, we're really walking a fine line between being prescriptive so that we can define a winner and being loose to drive innovation. And it's both definitely on both sides. Great questions.
Excellent. Really appreciate the momentum you're putting in the field on this.
Yeah, great. Yeah, again, if you have suggestions, toss them to us. We need them.
Wonderful. Next one up, we have John.
Listen, I put my question in the chat. Do you want me to read it all out?
Sure, if you want to, that would be great.
Right, I'm leading a team in the XPRIZE, and I'm a great fan of the XPRIZE because it allows approaches that experts think are crazy. And my obsession with transcription and translation is not thought to be a part of aging, but I think it is. And those XPRIZE said you won't predetermine the allowed approaches. And I'm a physicist, not a biologist. So you allow physicists to get involved as well as musicians like myself and ex-politicians. My question relates to the 1-year therapy period. Now, from our proposed therapy is quite helpful because pretty well all of it is not regulated. It's a very broad combinatory thing, which includes only one prescription medicine in the US, which is rapamycin. But it has a lot of MPK activators and HDAC inhibitors, histone deacetylase inhibitors for those who wish. But when I say a lot, 30, 40, and that's because they operate in the micromolar range. And if you take a number of these different things, you get a combined effect without the same side effect. So that's the logic of it. And even though these things are not regulated and they're considered to be foodstuffs, and they may be part, if you take traditional Chinese medicine, a lot of the Yankee stuff in the traditional Chinese medicine happen to be also AMPK activators. And so if you're looking to boost that area, you can use that. They've got no regulatory constraints, but obviously we'd want to test them out with each participant. So each participant takes each molecule on one day, and then you see if there's an adverse effect. So I personally had an adverse effect from PQQ, and so I don't want to use PQQ, even though it's non-regulated. The problem with that is when you have 30 to 40 different molecules, it's going to take a month or two. And the question is, does that count as part of the therapy period, or could it be considered to be a pre-testing part to check compatibility?
That is a very deep and involved question that I would say I don't think I have the resources needed to tell you a definitive yes or no without actually sitting down and walking through it, what it looks like and how it could be tested. Is that this is probably going to be one of those where we're being a little bit loose on the testing design, study design, because it will depend on the therapeutics and how they're being used, whether there's a run-in or a dose adjusting phase or not. But there will be a phase of whatever that looks like, is it will have some baseline before you do anything. And then we'll have some period we're going to measure after. And there's going to hopefully be another where we're looking at how long we need to have a washout if there's a washout. Our board is all over that one right now. We're not being prescriptive of what you do for your run-up.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. You've been very good. I know I've asked you questions before and you've been very good on the responses.
Good. No, I love it. Most of the questions are because our field is growing and they're questions we're all asking. And so this is great. I'm coming.
All right, we're going to keep them coming. Next one up, we have Ron John. If you can unmute, feel free to ask your question.
Great, thank you. Just a few logistics questions. I'm an inventor, but also a venture capitalist. I'm involved in lots and lots of teams. But so the teams are made up of individuals. Can individuals be part of multiple teams? So if you're a professor at Stanford and I've got all my students, they've got 5 teams, can I be a member of all of them?
I can definitively say yes. You
Great.
cannot lead 5 teams.
Okay.
You can, just with the way our system is set up, you can be on multiple teams, but you can only lead one.
Got it.
If you enter
then-
in, you're the PI for the one, but you can have a co-investigator role or a key personnel role or an advisory role on multiple. And we expect that and we encourage it. It's a network.
Got it. Yeah. I'm trying to get some of my companies work together. We'll see if they do.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely. And you can start out, and this is another one. So this is another kind of, and it happens a lot in XPRIZE, is that you can start out with one team and one group. Say you get in, you go to the team summit, you hear somebody working on this therapeutic or they have this molecule or thing that they've got, and you're like, actually, that's perfect. You can unform your teams and reform together. And so this is really meant to be, it's network driven. And so the idea is to build a community, and communities can look a little funky, meaning they break down, they come back. It's a growth model.
you pay another $500 and then that goes back to
Maybe we're actually discussing that. I'll have to take that back to the team, whether you have to pay another 500 or you just restructure and that one of those wins.
And is that a new thing? Because I registered in the first hour and then I don't remember paying $500.
I think it's up now. You might not have completed your application all the way through.
Okay, I need to check.
Just make sure you've done that before the price increase goes.
And then is it either an idea or maybe you have it in process? Are you collecting common resource, data sets, or maybe you do deal with Microsoft, so all the teams can use all the licenses all at once? Is there any of that already, or maybe it's an input for you guys?
Yeah, so that's going to be a later input for us. And so one of the goals for this is we're a nonprofit. Anything that goes in that we use for testing, right, for our judging criterion testings, all of the functional data, all of the assessment measures, all of that, when we are done, that becomes a public resource for use. We will also be providing upfront for any data collection platforms and things like that. Yes, there'll be common licenses that get used and other things. Again, biomarkers as collections, whatever those are, we'll be providing for the finalists. We'll be working to provide kits for biospecimen collections, looking for funding and partners and in-kind support to make sure we get as many biomarkers as we can get run. And those become part of a central resource. And so I think the least interesting thing we're going to do is give away the money. I think the best thing we're going to do is actually build the community, try to create a regulatory change, and then provide this as a common resource for discovery.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I hope you join us. I know you by your name and your work. So
I'm registered. We've registered already. I'll just double check. Yeah, very much, Jamie.
It will be interesting to see what's the maximum amount of teams that someone's in.
Yeah, Lauren, I think Lauren is on. She's our data person. Lauren, let's make sure we track that. You'll get a special award.
Okay, next one up, we have Jason.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Appreciate you putting this together and for everyone else coming on board. I've been looking to a project very similar actually for a couple of years. And so I'm very glad that some bigger organizations are getting together to put a lot of money into this and to have hundreds of teams competing towards this goal that I've had in the back of my mind for some time. So looking to compete, looking to form a team. Right. I did post in the chat that, and so anyone feel free to reach out. 2 quick questions. One, it sounds FSHD and the general prize, it sounds like we can compete in both as long as we do correct track. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question, I asked you this already via email, but I was going to ask you again, if you have any suggestions for smaller organizations to really get money in the door quickly, given the timeline, we don't really have much time.
That's the hardest.
Yeah. So I was just curious on your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so this is the number one. Lauren just developed reports on this before. That's the number one ask. And it's not isolated to this prize, but certainly the cost required to run trials and do, development, it's a lot. It's substantial. As an academic, where most of my job felt like asking for money. I get it. It was writing grants and trying to develop. It's a lot. So what we are doing is that, again, we can't do specific work to give people money, but what we're working on is trying to reach out to foundations and organizations to make sure they have a request for application or buckets of funds that are on the academic side, grant mechanisms that can support. And again, whether that's certainly the NIH, for those of you who have NIH funding, and I'm not sure if anyone here does, we've at least talked to the CG Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology, and they do a lot of funding. And at least they have said that if you have NIH funding, you can compete. There's no conflict. It's fine. and whether or not they open up specific funding or not. Evolution does have funds and that they're going to be promoting. They said they're going to have regular requests for applications. They're going to make sure that there's funding for teams that would be competing in this. So just want to put that out there as well. We are organizing partners and investors. So at our team summits, we'll have a specifics and investors group that will be there. And after our first stage, we will also have an investors summit. And so this is a chance for whether it's through VC or other individuals, they can, whatever that level is. So if you're looking for funding where we can't specifically make those, and we're not in any way in the business of whatever you do is up to you to get the funding. But we will do our very best to, again, whether that's through academic foundations, federal agencies, or private funders and investors, is that we'll at least try to make resources available and build platforms that people can meet each other that are interested in funding in the same areas. We know it's a struggle.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Maybe we have time for one more. Let's see. Yes, Aman, if you want to unmute and we'll see how far we get into the question.
Thank you very much for the talk. I just wanted to ask, before getting to this semi-finalist stage, you get the 10 million and start doing things. Before that, what do you need to see?
Great question.
At the moment, we have already some candidates.
Good.
And we are already developing methods on. We have some senolytics combinations that we expect to have some universal properties. But before, if you can prioritize what sort of test can give us a higher chance.
Yeah, so we'll be putting out later this spring our full, within our rules and regulations, we'll have our judging rubric for each of those qualifying rounds, especially that first one for the qualifying submission that has 40 people that advance into semifinals. That's really, again, it's research and development phase. So we're not being too limiting on this one. You could come in, maybe you have a list of drugs that you're interested in and that you've been working on screening. That's fine. You can list those, you can give evidence for each one, and that you can outline your screening procedure of how you're going to get there and the evidence that you'll have that we'll be able to check off for going into trials. You could have work across animal species that have showed that they're conserved. Certainly, if you're working for a new drug or something that you might have to get an IND in the US, is that typically requires that you have it shown in 2 mammalian species, one of them non-rodent. And so we know that can be a really high bar. And so that, again, if you're going to be ready for trials, it's just one of those things that our judges will be checking through is, do you have appropriate evidence that shows that this could be used? If you're looking at repurposed, again, that opens it up a little bit. You could be bringing in evidence from existing patient populations. You could be bringing in evidence from other preclinical models. We even have groups that are interested in using AI or machine learning approaches to go through drug repurposing data banks and doing some kind of in silico model. We're trying not to limit the approach. We're not intended to be the FDA. What we're trying to show is that there's a suggestion of effect, and that we need to actually be convinced out of the hundreds that we expect to come in that you have potential as one of the 40 to have something that's going to be effective. A pipeline for testing it definitively. And we have to be reasonably certain that you're going to be ready to go into trials, at least for your early stage proof of concepts if they're needed, phase 0, phase 1s by 2025. And you have to be ready to test in a 1 year up to phase 2 trial in 2026. And so that will require some savvy that you have identified a clinical trials testing center you can work with or partner with, and that you have enough of that background coming in that you can do this. And again, maybe you don't have some of those connections. I don't have the clinical trials partner. This is, again, where the global research network is meant to be developed, is that there are other people that want to be partnered with us that maybe they do therapeutic testing, maybe not, but they definitely have a clinical trial center and that they would be willing to work with those who need help to make it through those barriers. Again, don't limit yourself yet. And let us help a little bit and at least make it through that first team summit where if there are resources you're lacking, you might be able to partner up with somebody.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So,
Think we have to close it down. We're at time.
no.
Make sure that you guys, I'm hoping that this wasn't the last time, Jamie, that we have you on, because
bring me
as
back.
this process develops, I'm sure that people will want office hours in the sponsor community. And so whenever you or someone else from your team has a new update or something, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for initiating this. It's about time, and it's such a big and just impactful effort that I think it really is reverberating to the community in like a wonderful way. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come of it in the next 6 years. Not that much time.
We got time again. Yeah, welcome. Office hours, whatever you guys would like to do. Would love to stay involved. This is our target community. We want you guys to be part of it with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your great questions, and really excited for this effort, and hope to see you all soon. Bye, everyone.